The wind screamed at 80 miles an hour, plunging the temperature to 30 below zero. In the affluent suburbs of Oak Haven, $10,000 backup generators were failing, and people were freezing in their own living rooms. With the neighborhood outcast, he was sitting comfortably in his shirt sleeves. In the wealthy, manicured subdivision of Oak Haven, Colorado, aesthetics and modern convenience were king. The residents prided themselves on their smart homes, their heated driveways, and their flawless architectural designs. Andrew Dempsey, however, was the glaring exception, a 68-year-old retired pipeline engineer who had spent 20 years working the frozen, unforgiving rigs of Prudhoe Bay, Alaska. Andrew didn't fit in. His house was older, his truck was battered, and he possessed a gruff, solitary demeanor that rubbed the local homeowners association the wrong way. It was mid-February when the National Weather Service issued a chilling alert. A massive, unprecedented polar vortex, soon dubbed the Valentine's Day bomb cyclone, was barreling toward the state. Meteorologists were predicting historic lows, dumping feet of snow alongside wind chills that could easily hit 50 below zero. The neighborhood immediately went into a frenzy. SUVs packed the local Costco parking lots. Neighbors fought over the last bags of rock salt and premium firewood. Across the street from Andrew lived Greg Foster, a successful software executive whose response to the impending storm was a testament to his bank account. Greg spent the weekend loudly boasting to anyone who would listen about his newly installed $15,000 whole home propane generator. Let it snow, Greg chuckled to the HOA president, Brenda Carmichael, over the property line. We've got automatic switchovers. We won't even notice the grid going down. If it gets too cold, I'll just crank up the thermostat and stream some movies. Brenda nodded in agreement, wrapping her designer scarf tighter. I just hope everyone is taking this seriously. Speaking of which, look at what he is doing. Both of them turned to stare at Andrew Dempsey's property. What Andrew was doing defied all suburban logic. Instead of clearing his driveway, Andrew was actively using his snowblower to blast heavy, wet snow directly against his house. He was meticulously piling the snow up to the lower windowsills, creating a thick, packed rampart of white around the entire foundation of his brick home. Brenda was aghast. He's going to ruin his siding. The moisture will destroy the masonry. By the next afternoon, Andrew's erratic behavior escalated. He was seen dragging large, odd supplies into his home, dozens of emergency Mylar space blankets, rolls of heavy-duty duct tape, clay terracotta flower pots, and bulk tubs of Crisco shortening. He didn't buy a generator. He didn't buy firewood. He didn't even buy a space heater. Brenda marched over, her boots crunching on the freezing asphalt. Andrew, she snapped, waving a clipboard, I am issuing you a formal warning. You cannot pile debris and snow against your property line like this. It's an eyesore and a structural hazard. Andrew paused, leaning on his shovel. His weathered face was unreadable beneath his thick wool beanie. Brenda, in 48 hours, the wind is going to hit 80 miles an hour. Standard house insulation isn't designed to stop thermal stripping at that velocity. You're going to lose your heat. We have generators, Andrew, she scoffed. We live in the 21st century. Generators have mechanical limits. Andrew replied quietly, turning back to his work. Snow is nature's perfect insulator. I suggest you stop worrying about the HOA guidelines and start figuring out how to keep your pipes from bursting. Greg Foster, who had wandered over, burst into laughter. You're building an igloo, Artie? You're turning your house into an ice box. Don't come crying to us when you're freezing in the dark. Andrew didn't reply. He just kept packing the snow. That night, the bomb cyclone hit Oak Haven. It didn't just snow. The sky unleashed a violent, howling whiteout. The wind tore through the streets like a freight train, snapping ancient oak trees like matchsticks. At 2:15 a.m., a massive transformer blew on the edge of town, lighting up the sky with an eerie, violent green flash. Instantly, the entire subdivision plunged into darkness. In Greg Foster's house, the darkness lasted exactly 10 seconds before his massive exterior generator roared to life. The lights flickered back on, the furnace hummed, and Greg smiled in his warm bed, feeling vindicated and invincible. But nature has a cruel way of finding the weakest link in human engineering. By dawn, the ambient temperature outside had plummeted to an apocalyptic 38 degrees below zero. The wind chill was a staggering -60. At these extreme temperatures, the physical properties of matter begin to change. Outside Greg's house, the heavy liquid propane sitting in his outdoor tanks became sluggish. More importantly, the intricate metal regulator valve on his expensive generator, the piece that feeds the gas to the engine, succumbed to the moisture in the air and the catastrophic cold. It froze solid. At 7 a.m., Greg's generator sputtered, coughed, and died. Silence descended on his house, followed immediately by the terrifying creeping sensation of the cold. Without the furnace running, the brutal 80-mile-an-hour winds began a process Andrew had called thermal stripping. The sheer force of the wind violently ripped the ambient heat straight through the microscopic gaps in the home siding, drywall, and insulation. Within 4 hours, the temperature inside Greg's sprawling open-concept living room dropped from a cozy 70 degrees to 35. Across the street, Brenda Carmichael was experiencing the exact same nightmare. Her gas fireplace wouldn't ignite because the electronic starter relied on the dead grid. She and her husband huddled under their duvet, shivering uncontrollably as they watched their own breath turn to mist in their bedroom. By nightfall of day 2, Oak Haven was a disaster zone. The storm showed no signs of stopping. Cars were completely buried, their batteries frozen and dead, rendering escape impossible. Cell towers had long since failed. Inside Greg's house, panic had set in. The temperature was now 12 degrees indoors. His smart home thermostat was a blank, useless piece of glass. Suddenly, a sound like a shotgun blast echoed from the kitchen. The water inside his premium PEX plumbing had frozen, expanded, and violently ruptured the pipes beneath his hardwood floors. Greg's wife Sarah was crying, her lips turning a dangerous shade of blue. "Greg, we're going to freeze to death. We have to do something." Greg peered out the frosted, ice-covered glass of his front window. The neighborhood was a ghostly, black void. Except for one house. Andrew Dempsey's home was entirely dark, with no smoke coming from the chimney. The bottom half of the house was completely swallowed by a massive, continuous snowdrift that Andrew had artificially created. "He's dead," Greg whispered, staring at the snow-entombed house. The crazy old man froze to death. He didn't even have a fire going. Desperation breeds dark thoughts. Greg knew Andrew lived alone. He also knew Andrew had a basement full of tools and perhaps, just perhaps, some heavy-duty winter camping gear. "I have to go over there," Greg told Sarah, his teeth chattering violently. If he didn't make it, we might be able to use his supplies." Wrapped in 3 layers of useless designer winterwear, Greg forced his front door open. The wind immediately knocked him to his knees. The cold was a physical punch to the chest, instantly freezing the moisture in his nose. He crawled and trudged through the waist-deep snow across the street. As he neared Andrew's property, he noticed Brenda Carmichael and her husband David doing the exact same thing, stumbling out of their house like Arctic refugees. They met at Andrew's front porch, which was uniquely sheltered from the wind by the massive stone walls Andrew had built. "Our house is 8 degrees, Brenda sobbed, the frozen tears cutting lines down her face. Is Andrew? I don't know," Greg grunted, his arrogance entirely stripped away. He pounded heavily on Andrew's front door with a numb fist. Andrew, are you in there?" Silence. Desperate, Greg threw his shoulder against the door. To his surprise, it wasn't locked. It swung open, revealing absolute darkness. Greg, Brenda, and David stumbled into the hallway, bracing themselves for the sight of a frozen corpse. The hallway was cold, perhaps 40 degrees, but instantly they realized something profound. The howling, roaring sound of the wind that had been tormenting their sanity for 2 days was gone. The house was eerily silent. "Hello?" Greg called out, his voice shaking. From the center of the house, a faint, flickering orange light appeared. "Shut the door, Greg," a gruff voice echoed. "You're letting the draft in." The three frozen neighbors shuffled toward the light, moving into Andrew's central living room. When they stepped through the doorway, they stopped dead in their tracks, their minds struggling to comprehend what they were seeing. Andrew Dempsey was sitting in a recliner, wearing a simple flannel shirt, reading a paperback book. The room was a balmy, comfortable 60 degrees, but it looked like the inside of an alien spacecraft. Every single wall, the ceiling, and the floor were completely covered in gleaming, silver Mylar emergency blankets, sealed perfectly at the seams with heavy-duty duct tape. In the center of the room sat 4 large, clay terracotta flower pots, turned upside down. Underneath each pot, elevated slightly by bricks, burned a single, thick wick embedded in a tub of Crisco shortening. "Close the Mylar flap behind you," Andrew instructed casually, dog-earing his book. Greg collapsed to his knees, feeling the overwhelming, life-saving warmth of the room wash over his hypothermic body. "How?" he gasped. "How is this possible?" "You don't have power. You don't have gas. Physics, Greg." Andrew sighed, pouring a cup of warm water from a thermos and handing it to a trembling Brenda. "I tried to warn you." Andrew pointed to the walls. "Your house has lost heat because the wind stripped it away. The snow I packed against my exterior foundation, it acts as a windbreak and an incredible thermal insulator. The Inuit have known it for thousands of years. It trapped the ambient heat of the earth and the house inside." He gestured to the shiny walls. "This room is centrally located, no exterior windows. The Mylar reflects 90% of radiant body heat right back at us. As for the heaters," he pointed to the terracotta pots, "Crisco is just vegetable oil. It burns clean like a giant candle, lasting for days. The terracotta absorbs the flame's heat and radiates it outward, creating a micro furnace. Cost me about $20 at the hardware store." Brenda stared at the man she had threatened to find just 3 days ago. She was sitting in his makeshift survival pod, her life literally saved by the very eyesore she had despised. Overcome with a mixture of immense relief and crushing shame, she began to weep. "We thought you were crazy," David admitted, rubbing his frozen hands together over the warm clay pot. "We had $15,000 systems, and they failed us." "Technology is a luxury, David," Andrew said softly, his gruff demeanor softening as he pulled out extra blankets for his unexpected guests. "Survival is a skill. When the grid dies, the house with the biggest engine freezes first. The house that knows how to adapt survives." For the next 4 days, the blizzard of 24 battered Oak Haven. Down the street, pipes exploded, drywall collapsed, and millions of dollars of property damage accrued as the modern mansions surrendered to the ice. But inside Andrew Dempsey's Mylar-lined living room, Greg, Sarah, Brenda, David, and Andrew sat in a circle. They cooked canned soup over the makeshift Crisco stoves, played endless games of cards, and stayed perfectly warm. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, and the National Guard rolled into the subdivision in heavy-duty snowcats to rescue the trapped residents, they found Greg Foster's mansion practically destroyed by water damage and ice. They found Andrew Dempsey's house perfectly intact. As the snow melted away from the siding over the next few weeks, there wasn't a single scratch on his masonry. The Oak Haven Homeowners Association never issued another citation to Andrew Dempsey. In fact, the following October, long before the first frost, Greg Foster and Brenda Carmichael were seen in Andrew's driveway, quietly taking notes as the old pipeline engineer taught them how to properly seal their vents and build emergency radiant heaters. They had learned the hardest lesson the winter could teach. Arrogance will freeze you to death, but a little bit of unconventional wisdom will keep you alive. Survival isn't about how much money you spend, it's about how much knowledge you retain. If Andrew's brilliant, unconventional winter survival trick kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and share this video with your friends to keep them safe. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell for more unbelievable, real-life survival stories.